There was a question that came in, and I thought I would address this. It was about bond portfolio versus laddered CDs. You know, you've had a situation where sometimes stock markets and bond markets can move down together. When you have interest rates go up, that drives bonds down, and it also can drive stocks down because of cost of doing business can go up, which can short run hurt the profits of the company. So the question is, hey, do we go and just set up a laddered CD portfolio instead of a bond fund? And I'm going to address that because I think it's a fun question to get into. Now, if we look at laddered CDs, what is that concept? The idea is that I have a CD that I buy that may mature in 1 month, another one that may mature in 6 months, another one in 1 year, another one in 2 years, and 3 years, and 4 years, and 5. Now, there are times when I do talk about laddering CDs as being something that you might actually do in a financial planning scenario, but not in your regular investment portfolio for the reasons I'll talk about. Let's say that I look at this laddered CD concept. So what would we be seeing right now? Well, as of the beginning of August, right now you have CDs paying, and we looked at some local banks where you have a 1-year CD that might pay 0.5%, 0.5%, and that's about it. You don't get a whole heck of a lot better. You might be able to jump through some hoops, get in some online banks paying a little bit more, but not much more than that. And then you have to maybe jump through some hoops in having to meet requirements to get that interest rate. So we're going to skip that for now, but let's just look at, and you wouldn't get that much more interest anyway. Let's say that we look at a 5-year CD. So we're just going to look at those two ranges just there from short, very short to very long, or longer anyway. And you might be able to get, 2 to 3% on your interest rate on a 5-year CD. So not a whole lot more, but typically you'll get a little higher interest rate on a longer maturity CD. Now, if we look at an investment portfolio, a bond portfolio that you might have, and I actually looked at the data on different bonds that I would have in a portfolio, anywhere from 1-year bonds all the way up to intermediate maturity corporates and government bonds. I like it to be safe. That's the idea behind your bond portfolio. If you look at that and you look at what is called yield to maturity. So when we look at yield, that's one thing in investing. So what is the interest rate that the bond is paying? That's the yield, or the coupon rate is what we call that. Now, the yield to maturity is going to have a couple different things, and especially right now, it's interesting because what's going on right now as we speak is, and if we just kind of walk through this by going, how does a bond work at first? I would pay $1,000 to buy a bond. Now, at some point in the future, that bond will mature for $1,000, and I'll get my $1,000 back. Now, let's say that when it was issued, interest rates were extremely low, or let's say that the interest rate was 2%, just to put a number on it. That would mean that I would get $20 per year over the next, and let's say that it's going to be, 5 years. Okay, so it's 5 years, that's a 2. That's what I'm going to get. And all of a sudden, let's say that the interest rates went up in the marketplace. So the interest rates jumped up, and instead of 2%, let's say that they're 5%, just for an example. Now, a new bond, and let's say that it happened after 1 year, a new bond is going to pay, instead of $20, it's going to pay $50 per year over the next 4 years, because remember, this is issued 1 year into. This is a 5-year bond. This is a 4-year bond maturing at the same period in time. What would happen to the price of my existing bond? Well, what would happen is, for me to entice somebody to buy it from me, I'm going to have to drop the price so that the yield between this bond and the yield between this old bond would be the same, the yield to maturity. What would I have to drop it to? And the answer would be approximately about $890 is what I'd have to drop it to. So in essence, I've got a 10% drop in my value from my bond from here to here, a little bit more than 10% drop in the value. Now, what will happen is the new buyer will pay only $890. They're going to get $1,000 back, so they're going to get $110 in growth between $890 and $1,000, plus they'll get the $20 payments. They'll get a lower payment, but they're going to get this, whereas they wouldn't have had any growth in that one. Hope that makes sense. Now, what is happening right now is bond portfolios that have all different maturities and different what we call durations technically have anywhere from a 2 to a 5% yield to maturity right now. So if we look at that and we say, well, it's 2 to 5%, and right here we've got these 5-year bonds. I didn't write the number up here, but remember I said that's 2% right there. We've got anywhere from 1-year bonds paying, I should probably be consistent here, 1-year bonds paying 2%, and then the yield to maturity to where the 5-year bonds are sitting there at like a 5% yield to maturity. And you look at that and go, well, any way you slice it, that's better than that right there in the yield to maturity. So that's one reason we don't ladder it. The other thing you keep in mind is that when we go and put all our money in CDs, now we've lost diversification. We're only putting our money in bank investments or bank notes, and that would be a problem because what happens if something happens to the bank? What if the FDIC insurance is there, but you could actually have your money locked up? The other thing is that when we're diversified in a bond portfolio, you'd be diversified all around the world, not just in the United States. So you would have a lot greater diversification with that. The other thing is this. What if we're rebalancing a portfolio? The logistics would be a pain in the neck. Because every time I go and rebalance, I might have to sell some bonds and then buy some stocks. And with the CDs, I could have back-end surrender penalties for doing that. And then when the CDs mature, you got to go and shop for a new CD and see who's paying the highest interest rate at that point in time. Another logistical nightmare. So there are a lot of reasons that we wouldn't ladder a portfolio or use CDs laddered, whereas using a bond portfolio would be a much better and much more practical option for managing an investment portfolio. Now remember, what people typically do is this though, is after anything goes down, whether it be stocks or bonds, what we tend to do is we complete patterns in our mind. We think it's going to continue to go down. And if it's going up, we go, good grief, this is going up. We need to buy because we think it's going to continue to go up. So that's another reason that people would ask questions like this. And it's a reason that we might want to change our portfolio, is because, oh my goodness, this pattern is going to continue. And the reality of it is that is just market timing when we change our investment portfolio based on a prediction or a forecast of the future. And it's typically why investors get really bad results with investing. And this is why we spend so much time educating, because the more educated investor doesn't get pulled off track so easily. And I think the way to educate people is help them understand how this stuff works. So I hope that helps.